Hello everyone and welcome back in. This is episode 5 of our T55 building the base for our Mogadishu, Somalia street scene. And boy, time sure flies. It seems like just, 4 episodes ago, which means I guess 4 weeks ago, that we just got started on this scene with just a piece of wood and a few pieces of foam core, making just some, loose mock-ups. Well, in the meantime, of course, we built our buildings, we painted our buildings with these nice storefront signs. Last episode, we painted some figures, and of course, in the prior series, we built the T55 itself, and they'll put a link up in the corner where that series of build episodes can be found. Before I get to today's actual construction, let me step back just a little bit to one of the earlier episodes, and this is a part of the construction that I did not put into the original video series, but I think it's kind of a fun little trick and might be helpful. So the taller building, the flat-roofed building, I wanted it to have basically asphalt or tar paper type of a finish to it. And I found that this works really, really easy. It's just a simple hack. I use 600 grit sandpaper, which is naturally a black in color, and it has exactly the right type of a texture on it, just a little bit of kind of that gritty sandpaper texture. And then just to show a little bit of patching and wear and unevenness, I just cut out little squares and paste them on with using a little bit of white PVA glue. Super easy, super quick, and the only thing left to do after the glue dries here is just add a little bit of dust weathering and things like that just to kind of tie it in with the rest of the scene. So the last time we were working on the base, the street itself, the last thing we were doing, we added the various terrains textures to create the earth and the broken up concrete. And then now at this point, it's time just to start bringing it all together. And of course, that's going to be done primarily through the use of paint. Well, no surprise here, the colors are going to be earth and dust tones. And when I'm painting this, it's really a random, it's very random. I'm just adding these dust tones, especially in those areas of exposed earth between the asphalt. And then I'll come back and forth with the colors. There's everything from a light buff color to say this little bit more reddish brown earth tone, but it's this layering of colors that's so important at this stage, and that just lays the foundation for what I feel like is at least a visually interesting appearance overall. Next, I turn my attention to the sidewalk and the concrete areas of this scene, and these are just been painted by hand with a brush using these AK real colors. And I first laid down basically what would be a mid-tone gray, a concrete color. And now it's just coming back in with a darker gray color and a lighter sand color, and just starting to build up again these layers and traffic patterns and interesting nuances to the sidewalk itself. That same light sand color that I was using on the sidewalk, I want to make sure that I'm pulling that into across the street as well. And I just do this with a little bit of washes. This is, of course, this very highly thinned acrylic paints, and just letting it flow into all the little surface nuances and cracks and crevices. And this, once again, it just starts tying all the different elements of this scene together. The other thing that I'm keeping in mind as I'm working on the base right now is that I'm referring back to the T55 itself. And so many of the same colors that I'm using for the weathering of the groundwork are the same colors that I use for the weathering of the T55. So there will be unity of the model and the base once everything gets put together on the scene here. And by now, if you've been following any of my projects, we've come to that part of the process where I start picking out some of the finer details and taking my time with the paintbrush and just pulling out some of those little rocks and details, and in other cases might be the roots or tree trunks or things like that, and just finessing them a little bit, giving them a little bit of highlight, a little bit of sparkle. And in my opinion, this is one of the more important steps at this stage. And yes, a lot of it might be covered up with later weathering steps, but that's the whole point of layering and how to create a dynamic and visually interesting scene, is just adding layer upon layer, and whether it gets covered up or not, you're not really worried about that, because in the end, it all becomes part of a complete picture. In that spirit of adding more layers and textures, looking at the scene, yeah, it's progressing, but it still looks a little bit too, tidy, not cluttered enough, not quite enough disarray. One easy fix for this is just to add a little bit of, in this case, it's railroad ballast, just very small stones, and just being held in place with a little bit of white glue, highly diluted with water. And then I'll come back on these in a little bit after the glue has dried, and with just a little bit of paint, make everything look like, well, it's supposed to be there. This is really the most enjoyable part of modeling for me, this when we finally get to this stage where everything is coming together and it's just working on the base, it's actually incredibly relaxing. You really can't make a mistake at this point. Nothing you can do right now can't be fixed. There's no rules. It's just a matter of adding whatever details and attention that you feel like adding to the base. So for me, just this is modeling. This is modeling Zen zone time. However, I do need to leave the Zen zone for just a little bit because I do have one more element that I need to add to the scene. And this one, well, quite frankly, is a little bit tedious. Returning back to the references, we can see, especially, I'm looking above here at the skyline now, the power poles and especially the power wires. They are all over the place. They just run them from here to there. They run straight into the sides of the buildings. They are disconnected here and there. So I need to add that element to the scene as well. So a few power poles and some wiring. Well, so the first thing I need to do is come up with some power lines. And I'm going to use two different styles here. And the first is going to be just some electrical wire that I've stripped of its insulation. And I'm just giving it a real quick rub with the sandpaper. And that's just to give it a little bit of surface texture, a little bit of surface bite. Because the next thing I want to do is drop this into a little bit of blackening solution, because of course I want my wires to be black in color, and this will blacken the wires and I won't have to worry about painting them or having any little exposed areas of copper showing through on the model itself. So once I've got a little collection of blackened wire, I'm going to just make some of these little, I don't even know what these are, they're little insulation junction boxes, I'm not even sure, but you see them all the time on power lines, these little thicker areas here and there, and that's kind of what I'm trying to recreate here. And so I'm just threading a little bit of the wire through this little bit of plastic tubing. And then for the power poles, well, remember back when we did the M3 Lee and I used those grilling skewers, the shish kebab sticks? Well, guess what I'm using here for the power poles? And they work just really, really good. Again, natural wood feel to them, gave them a little bit of a wash of oil paints just to tone down the color a little bit. And then just a little bit of details here and there, using a little bit of evergreen strip and plastic rod, a few pieces of wire here and there. And this is actually these little bands that you see on these power poles, just Tamiya tape wrapped around, and I'm just painting them a little bit more of a oxidized steel color. Now I've got everything pretty much put together, and now this was really where the tedious part starts coming in, where I'm just starting to add all the wiring to the power poles and then across the scene itself. The thicker wires mostly are added just to the power pole itself, just as cut wire or spools of wire just hanging out there. And then the easy line is what I generally used to go across the scene itself. So that's where the real tedious part came into play. Well, we're really coming down to the final stretch here on this scene now. The building has been affixed to the base, so I already had it, you've seen in the earlier episodes where I had it blocked out, so it was ready just to set once I had everything ready to go. And now just with a little bit of washes here and there, just starting to bring some of these details out a little bit more, enhance some of the shadows. The front door, the blue doors of the fast food restaurant, add a few little rust tones here and there just to kind of give it a little bit of, I don't know, depth and sparkle, interest, I guess it would be. And then finally, I want to add just some pigments to the scene, and this will just really tie it all together and help create that, again, that dusty, dirty sort of appearance. Pigments are one of those tools that a lot of people either love or hate, and I happen to be in the I really like them, love them sort of the world. And on this scene, adding these pigments, that's the part that just, in my mind, brought everything together over the top. The colors worked great and unified all the different tones that were underneath it with the painting that we had done, and just the softness of the pigments really added that dusty appearance that I was looking for overall on the entire scene. Well, here we are getting close to that bittersweet moment. We're coming to the end of another project. If you do like this channel and like this series, please hit that subscribe button if you have not already done so. If you do enjoy this channel and would like to support it even further, I do have a Patreon page, and the link for that is below. If you are a Patreon, you get to see these videos before they hit the public viewing. I provide photographs of ongoing projects, video tutorials on specific techniques and tricks. And of course, the chat is always open. And so what is customary at the end of every episode, and especially now at the end of this series, this project, let's take a look at some of these final images and just see what we ended up with. Now, I've mentioned this a few times over the course. This has been a really interesting and very fun project. Something so much out of my usual comfort zone that every day was an adventure. Let's put it that way. But once I got started on this and was able to find those references, especially of those storefronts and the graphics, it just started to come together, and I had just a heck of a good time putting this together. And like I said, I hope you enjoyed watching and following along as well. As always, I really do appreciate your support and your comments. Please leave them below if you have any. Again, subscribe if you haven't done that already. And of course, the Patreon is always open as well, and the link for that is below. Looking a little bit into the future, yep, we do have a new project in the works. Just getting started on that, but it looks to be a pretty fun project as well. Still trying to get the whole concept in my head of where we're going with it, but I do have some elements completed, and so look for new videos with this new project in the very, very near future. So until then, again, thank you very much for following along. Keep safe, happy modeling, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Take care.